Good morning. Welcome to the September 16th meeting of the Santa Barbara City Water Commission. And clerk, could I have a roll call of the commissioners, please?
Yes. Commissioner Keller?
Here.
Commissioner Kammeier?
Here.
Commissioner Cooney?
Here.
Vice Chair Young?
Here.
And Chair Davis?
Here.
Thank you.
Everyone is present. It goes to, are there any changes to the agenda this morning?
Chair Davis, there are no changes to the agenda.
Great, thank you very much. That takes us to item 5, consent items. There are 3 items. 5A, meeting minutes, the approval of the minutes of August 19th, 2021. Item 5B, the approval of land use covenant for El Estero Drain and Habitat Restoration Site. Item 5C is an agreement with the United States Geological Survey for surface water and groundwater monitoring. Are there any questions from the commissioners this morning on any of these 3 consent calendar items? Not seeing any questions. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone under public comment who wishes to speak on the consent?
Yes, we do have public comment. Let me pull up the timer. We have Berlinda Blackburn. Berlinda, you are unmuted. Ms. Blackburn, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Let's see.
I had inadvertently jumped over general public comment and went right into the consent calendar.
Okay, I think we're having some issues with the audio. One moment. Okay. Chair Davis, did you want to circle back until we can get Ms. Blackburn's audio set up?
Yes, let's table the consent calendar item for a second time, come back to general public comment. Is there anyone who has put in to speak under general public comment? That is items within our purview of the Water Commission, but not on today's agenda?
Chair Davis, I don't see anyone's hand raised.
Okay. We're back to item 5, consent. I've called those items. There have been no comments from the commission themselves. Is our public speaker ready to speak at this time, or what's our status?
Let's try again. Ms. Blackburn, I have sent you an audio pin. You can please enter that. Ms. Blackburn says she does not have audio, but she wanted to know the status of the FOG contract with Marburg. So that would be general public comment.
Great. Okay. Let the record show that that was under item 4, general public comment. We're back to the consent items. There are no comments. Is there a motion for approval of the consent items?
I'll move for approval.
So I have Commissioner Young. Commissioner Young is the motion. I think Commissioner Keller was second. I'll take that for now. And a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Commissioner Keller?
Yes.
Commissioner Kammeier?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney?
Yes.
Vice Chair Young?
Yes.
And Chair Davis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Consent calendar is approved unanimously. Takes us to our administrative items. Item A, the professional services contract for capacity charges and wastewater rates study. Who would like to open this one up? Mr. Hamilton?
Yes, thank you, Chair Davis, members of the commission, Malcolm Hamilton, Water Resources Financial Officer. Here today, go over a fairly brief presentation on a recommendation for a professional services contract for capacity charges and wastewater rate study. Next slide, please. So I'll be going through these 6 items today, and I apologize, I'm getting a little feedback. And keeping the presentation fairly high level, we do have tentatively scheduled for next month to have our consultant come back and do more of a deep dive on the rate setting process. But I would like to outline the scope of work and some of the other elements of the study today. Next slide, please. So we talk about this a lot with the Water Commission, but the importance of the mission of the wastewater utility, particularly its role in the protection of public health and the environment. And so the nexus with our rate study is going to be making sure that there are sufficient funds to invest in the wastewater system infrastructure, and not just at our current levels, but if possible, within reasonable rate increases, to increase our investment in the infrastructure of the wastewater system. And so we'll be looking at that pretty intently and talking with the Water Commission about how we invest in the system. Secondly, we want to make sure that we generate sufficient revenues through the wastewater rate study to operate the system and continue to provide exceptional customer service and enhance our customer service. For example, in the last year or two, the sewer lateral inspection program, the SLIP program, has gone through substantial changes to improve the customer service to the community, and we want to make sure rates support programs and initiatives like that for the wastewater system. And then finally, making sure that our rates support our long-term financial stability for the wastewater system. Of course, the rate schedule is going to be looking at about a 3 to 5 year program, but we want to take a higher level view as well and look out 10 years and make sure that our rates have the right trajectory to get us to where we want to go in the long term. Next slide, please. So the recommendation before you today is that that the city execute an agreement with HDR Engineering for the capacity charges and wastewater rate studies. HDR Engineering is the consultant who completed the last two rate studies, so the wastewater rate study and most recently a water rate study that we just completed in June of this year. The staff has been very satisfied with the work product from HDR, particularly in the area of public presentations. We think they do very well at being clear and understandable and making the rate setting process very digestible, which can get wonky at times, but we think they do well at communicating directly with the public, the Water Commission, and City Council. So they've done well on those last two rate studies. Secondly, we believe they have a very experienced team. And of importance is their experience in California. Although they are based out of Washington, the project manager for the team works in California very often. I put on the right-hand side here some recent California rate studies they've done. They're very familiar with the California environment and Proposition 218. So Proposition 218 regulates how we can set rates and what costs and how they are recoverable with our rate classes. And then finally, we do always want to make sure that we're getting a competitive price for the services through the city. They were selected just a couple years ago for the water rate study. We found their prices competitive at the time, and the prices that they're proposing for this rate study now, the wastewater rate study, have really just followed inflationary increases. So we still believe that they are offering competitive pricing for the city. Next slide, please. In the contract, we've gone over just a few elements here of what we'll be asking HDR to look at. And I really want to hone in on the first bullet point. We're asking them to do an update to the existing rate model. So 2 years ago with the wastewater rate model, we did a comprehensive reformulation of the model. We consolidated some customer classes. Some of you may have recall that we added a new customer class, which was high strength surcharges to better capture customers who had extremely high strength discharges that were outside of the normal industrial range. And so we thought we did a very good job at actually going through the entirety of the rate structure and making appropriate changes. So this time around, it is not going to be comprehensive. It'll just be an update to our previous rate study, kind of looking at our new financial forecast, considering policy changes, but although we don't anticipate drastic changes at this time. Secondly, a big component of the rate study will be the cost of service analysis. And really the intent of the cost of service analysis is to ensure that we are compliant with Proposition 218 so that each customer class is paying fair and equitable rates for the benefits that they receive. And then finally, developing a rate schedule that provides that sufficient revenue to operate the system, to meet the cost of the system. We are going to be looking at a rate schedule about 3 to 5 years. We will bring that to Water Commission to talk about further. We've been doing 3-year rate schedules, and we are going to be looking at a 5-year rate schedule as well. There's benefits and drawbacks to going a longer period of time between rate studies. And so we want to bring that to Water Commission, just have that conversation with the consultant. Next slide, please. I want to talk about kind of 2 areas of the rate study to expect, one of which on the left here is the consideration. So of course, with any rate study, whether it's a solid waste or water or wastewater, in this instance, we're going to be looking at maybe these broad objectives here. Of these, we really want to talk about affordability in this rate study. In the water rate study that was just completed, we were able to add some funding for enhanced customer billing assistance, and we want to take a look at that as well for the wastewater side of the bill and see what's possible. Of course, we want to balance the rate increases with the affordability of the bill. And so putting that all together, it can be challenging at times when we want to, on one hand, be investing in the system, investing in the capital infrastructure, but on the other hand, limiting rate increases. So we have to find the balance there, and certainly want to have that conversation in more detail with the Water Commission. And then on the right-hand side, we're going to get into good amount of detail about this with the consultant themselves, but just to briefly outline the rate study process, which is a revenue requirement, a cost of service analysis, and rate design. And so this is a utility industry standard: electric, gas, wastewater, solid wastewater. Almost every utility goes through this very identical process, which is identifying how much revenue you need, the revenue requirement, the cost of service, which is allocating the revenue requirement to the different customer classes, and then finally, rate design. So how exactly are you going to collect that revenue through the cost of service analysis? Next slide, please. So this study that HDR is going to be doing, if approved by City Council and recommended by Water Commission, will have the 2 components. There will be a wastewater rate study, and then the other side of that will be a capacity charges study. Capacity charges are assessed on customers that want to connect to the system for the first time, or they want to expand their connections to the system. So a new sewer lateral, for instance, or expanding the meter size of an existing meter, they may incur some capacity charges. Commonly referred to as buy-in fees, and buy-in fees does a very good job at explaining kind of exactly what they are. All of our existing customers to date have paid into the water and wastewater systems, and they've invested in infrastructure. And for that reason, the infrastructure is there for new customers to connect to. So when they want to connect, they have to pay something to buy into the system and bring themselves kind of on equal footing with our existing customers. Just want to let you know that this is a comprehensive review. So we're going to be going top to bottom on our capacity charges, kind of turning over every stone, looking at every element of our previous study. By no means do we think the previous study was flawed in any way, but we just want to make sure that we are up to date with industry standards for the methodology of calculating capacity charges. Want to make sure we're considering all alternatives and that we're meeting all current state and, if applicable, federal legal requirements. Next slide, please. We want to build on what we did with the water rate study. We had a fairly robust public outreach project for the water rate study, and we want to build on that for the wastewater rate study. So we are planning several meetings with the Water Commission between now and the proposed final rates and capacity charges. We will be going to Finance Committee. We will be going to City Council for a public hearing. We'll be using our media outlets to the best of our ability when appropriate. So City News and Brief is a weekly newsletter that comes out from the city. We can use that frequently. We have e-newsletters available to us. Primarily, it's the one that's put up by the Water Resources Division, the e-sources newsletter, and then using other community type outreach, such as Nextdoor, we utilize those as well. And then finally, our third element here is direct outreach with billing inserts that go to all of our customers that receive a paper bill. A Proposition 218 notice will notify all of our customers of the proposed increases in their rates. And in addition, the Proposition 218 notice will be enhanced. So we intend to not just have the noticed rate increases on there, but we will have a supplemental piece of paper that will really tell the story and narrative behind why we need the rate increases. And we did that with water, and we're going to do it again this time with wastewater. It was well received. And finally, a public webinar, an informational public webinar, so we can invite the public to hear us go through the proposed rates before the public hearing with City Council. Next slide, please. And then just before I wrap up, I want to look at the tentative work schedule for these items. You will notice on these top two rows, so the wastewater rates development and capacity charges development are going to be happening concurrently. So to the best of our ability, we will be doing both of these efforts at the same time, hearing them with Water Commission at the same meetings. And if you look at the schedule going out to about February 2022 is when we anticipate largely all of the technical analysis is done by February. Then we move into drafting the final reports for both the capacity charges and wastewater rate study, and then bringing those to Water Commission for consideration. If you notice, Water Commission right now, we've tentatively scheduled 4 meetings, not including this one. So next month, an introduction to rates with our consultant, possibly one in December, and February and March for final recommendations on rates and capacity charges. We will then go to Finance Committee, have a public webinar, initiate the Proposition 218 noticing, so we have to clear 45 days before the public hearing, and then finally the public hearing in June 2022. Our recommendation will be that rates go into effect on July 1st, 2022. So working back from that date is how we come up with this schedule. Next slide, please. And then finally, the recommendation in the staff report was that council authorize the Public Works Director to execute a professional services contract with HDR Engineering. And I'd be happy to answer any questions Water Commission may have.
Are there any questions from the commission at this point for Mr. Hamilton?
Yes,
Okay,
Chair.
I'll go to Commissioner Young and then go to Councilmember Snedden. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. Mr. Hamilton, could you go back to slide 3? And I'm just curious, your comment about wanting to be able to invest in infrastructure, I'm not quite sure what that meant. You know, my reaction to that was, are we not investing everything we should be in our infrastructure? Or are there additional investments that staff sees that would be ideal? Could you elaborate on that?
Sure, Chair Davis, Commissioner Young. I see on the corner of my screen, Ms. Flessie's jumped on, so I'll defer to her on the planned capital asset infrastructure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Chair Davis, Commissioner Young. Yes, these rates actually coincide with our master plan capital improvement programs. So for both the treatment and the collection system and our lift stations, we have identified those needs for the next 10 to 20 years, and these rates will be in support of those needs.
Okay.
Would you like examples? So You know, a lot of our lift stations where we're working on via Lacero, looking at putting in some infrastructure to make redundancy. Our treatment needs, you know, right now we're funding our digester rehab and the dome replacement. We're working on our chlorine contact chamber and looking for redundancy there. That is part of our treatment needs. As far as our collection needs, all of our rehab and rehabilitation and point repairs for our collection needs is half of it goes to the treatment and the other half goes to our collections. So there are a lot of needs that have been identified in the upcoming years.
Okay, so are we looking to start funding redundancy where we have not been funding redundancy so far? Is that kind of where this is going?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, we're trying to identify the single points of failure in both our treatment and collections, and improving any existing infrastructure needs.
Great. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair Davis, Vice Chair Young, we will be coming back to you. We're working on both a separate water system update and a wastewater system update. And as part of that, we plan to dig into more details on what those capital projects are and kind of our master planning that's going on into the future, and kind of give you some more context that will be going into this, obviously, rate development.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hagmark. Councilmember Snedden.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Just, I think a quick question about when we're looking at capacity and for wastewater, you know, if we are looking at long-term SB9 or maybe more residential in hillside areas, or I've heard a lot about the pipes there not being adequate, and will that just be part of the study? We might not have the answer now, but the increased rates if we do have increased demand in sort of outlying areas.
Chair Davis, Councilmember Sten, let me just start about the rate study, and then again, I'll hand this off to Ms. Flessy for the infrastructure discussion. But in the rate study, there's always going to be a projection about the number of new connections, or the growth in connections over time, and that will be accounted for and then distributed out proportionally those costs. So there is a growth element to the capacity study.
Thank you. And is that part of the pros and cons of doing short-term versus long-term analysis? Is that we might not know, or?
Certainly, if the longer out you go in a rate schedule or capacity charges schedule, the more open you are to changes in your assumptions over time, one of which could be growth or any of the other elements.
Thank you.
You want to add to that, Ms. Flessy? Anything else?
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate that the master plan right now, we are at an old master plan of development for the city of Santa Barbara. And I think that is one of the things we do have to look at, because a lot of our master plan didn't have a lot of ADU and kind of infrastructure in there. And that's something that we need to look at as far as capacity in our collection system, and then the overall capacity of our treatment system.
That's exactly what I was wondering about.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I thought you were going that way, but yeah, our old master plan really did not address the ADU, and so we need to relook at that.
Yeah, we did have a master plan that did look at capacity constraints throughout the collection system, and so there was a plan to address those capacity constraints. And I'll just say this, most of those are during wet weather events, because we do have a lot of infiltration and inflow into the collection system. But as Ms. Plessy was getting to, taking a fresh look at that to just make sure that the increase in state requirements or ability to have these accessory dwelling units doesn't have another impact.
Thank you.
Good. Other questions from commissioners? I have a process one, which is pretty minor. It appears to be a sole source contract. I'm just curious if the city's procurement rules for going sole source are in this regard. Hamilton?
Yes, Chair Davis, the requirements of which would be taking the item to City Council and fulfilling two elements, one of which is determining that the consultant is qualified, which we've laid out here, and second component of that is that the city's getting a fair price for the services offered, which we also laid out in the presentation.
Yeah, no, I noticed that. Thank you very much for the clarification on that. If there are no other questions from the commissioners, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item?
Chair Davis, we do not have public comment at this time.
Okay, that will take us back to the commission. The recommendation is for council to authorize the Public Works Director to execute a city's professional service contract with HDR for capacity charges and wastewater rate study. Do I have a motion to that effect?
I hope so.
Okay. Commissioner Keller has made the motion and is looking for a second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Cooney. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Kemeyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Young,
Yes.
and Chair Davis.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, for the presentation, and Ms. Plessy for the extra comments in that regard. This takes us on to item 6B. This is an update on energy climate activities. It is a presentation, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Hagmark to introduce this item. Joshua.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Commissioners, after our lively discussion at the workshop of August, we have set aside a fairly developed presentation here on what the city is doing related to energy and climate. And we have with us today Elia Parento, who is the manager leading that group. And at the part of this conversation is bringing it back. She's going to give you the big picture of how and what the city is doing here at large in the community, but how this boils down to obviously the purview of the commission as it relates to water. And so we will have opportunities during this presentation to kind of stop and pause and talk about the crossroads with water. And as this commission knows, there's a lot of nexus or a lot of connections here with energy and climate as it relates to our water resources. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Parento. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmark and commissioners. I'm happy to be here today and break down some of the activities that the division is undertaking, and in particular, how they relate to water, the water system, and operations. So next slide, please. In a broad brush, these are the things that the Energy and Climate Division does. So we do energy planning for the city and the community as a whole. We are working on energy assurance, which is ensuring that the energy systems we have in place continue to operate in a disaster situation. Community choice energy, which is going live in 2 weeks. So we'll talk a lot about that today. We implement and manage energy projects. We oversee green building policy for the city. We oversee the climate action planning and then implementation of the plan. And then newly to our group is climate adaptation. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Next slide, please. So first, let's talk about planning and assurance. Next slide. So in June of 2017, as you're likely aware, the City Council did commit to a 100% renewable energy or electricity goal for the entire Santa Barbara community. So not just municipal operations, but the entire community. When they established that goal, we were at about 42% for municipal operations and 35% renewable electricity for the community. This has gone up just a little bit because of Edison's renewable portfolio has increased lately, but we're roughly the same place today. So as a result of that goal, Council did direct staff to develop a strategic plan that laid out the way to achieve that goal. Next slide, please. So the strategic energy plan did underline the council priorities, and as they were stated to us, that was to increase grid reliability, so building systems here that would help us have more reliable electricity, to enhance disaster resiliency and be able to recover from a disaster more quickly. No use of renewable energy credits, which are typically decoupled from the renewable energy project itself and sold as a separate commodity. We wanted to promote local economic development and workforce development, and we wanted to decrease local greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So the strategic plan is in its implementation phase. We're in year 3 of implementing the plan. And here are some things that we've done so far. We've been very active in the permit streamlining space, implementing on-demand permitting for solar systems of a certain size, as well as solar with storage, meaning that an applicant can get an instant permit if they have meet certain parameters. And that's been very popular. We've had over 200 applicants use this system so far, so that's very exciting. We've implemented local energy projects, including at several water facilities, such as El Estero and some of the lift stations. We have adopted a REACH code, a natural gas infrastructure prohibition, not allowing new natural gas infrastructure in new construction only. So that's really exciting for us too. We've developed a new website and team. Our team has expanded from 1 person to 5 people so that we're able to do a whole lot more work. And it doesn't seem like the work ever reduces. So that's great that we have a bigger team. I've got a little snapshot of our website here I'd encourage you to check out. And then most importantly, we're implementing community choice energy, which is really the underpinning for a lot of what we're going to talk about today. It's facilitating a lot of the advancements on the goals, as well as the investments that we want to make to accomplish the goals. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for water so far in terms of the planning and assurance? Well, it means that we're getting energy efficiency upgrades and leveraging funding from the utilities, incentives, rebates, etc. An example of this for the last year was some El Estero lighting upgrades that our team accomplished and saved overall operations some dollars, which was great. Additionally, we're working on power backup up at Cater. We have a large-scale Tesla battery system that's going in at Cater, and we'll back up 2 of the large pumping systems up there. This was fully paid for by the self-generation incentive program's resiliency budget, because Cater is located in a high fire zone. So that's really exciting for us. We're also continuing to explore on-site generation. Water is a large landowner, and so it does provide some opportunity to develop larger scale energy generation or storage systems. So we're currently looking at Loro floating solar with a Bren group. We're looking at options once the El Estero electrical project is completed. What might we be able to do at that site? Expand the cogen, install some solar or some batteries. And then we're looking at some of the reservoir sites as potential project sites. Could batteries be located on those sites as additional backup supply for the whole city? Next slide, please. All right, Santa Barbara Clean Energy. This is our community choice energy entity. It's launching for the residential sector on October 1st, and for all other sectors, including municipal and water system, March of 2022. Really, the underlying philosophy behind this is that we know what our community needs better than a large-scale utility territory does, and we're really all about protecting our coast and having a better future. Next slide, please. So today, you only have the choice of Southern California Edison's power mix, and because they're a shareholder-owned utility, they're typically looking for the cheapest way to get that power out, and so typically only meet the minimum renewable portfolio standards set forth by the state. Santa Barbara Clean Energy is more aligned with our council's goals of that 100% renewable electricity, as well as their more recently established goal of carbon neutrality by 2035. And so we are defaulting our entire service territory to carbon-free electricity. This all but accomplishes council's 2017 goal well ahead of the target year. Excuse me. Next slide, please. CCE, or Community Choice Energy, is all about choices. Today, you only have Edison as a choice for your electricity provider, and once Santa Barbara Clean Energy launches, you'll have multiple choices. And I'm going to go into what each of these choices mean in a little bit, but these are all of the options to our customers. Next slide, please. It is really, really important to understand that we are not taking over the infrastructure. Southern California Edison continues to maintain the poles and wires in this scenario, and it's just a really unique partnership between the investor-owned utilities, whose bread and butter is the infrastructure, and local governments who have lofty climate goals like Santa Barbara. Next slide, please. So who's enrolled? By law, everyone in a service territory is enrolled. The reason that this exists is really for the success of the programs. The California Public Utilities Commission acknowledged that if someone had to take an enrollment action, it was less likely to succeed, only because people are not typically motivated to do that, even if they like the program. So they've decided that everyone would be enrolled with the option to opt out. So that means here in Santa Barbara, all municipal buildings, including the desal plant, we like to point that out because that comes up a lot, residential buildings, small businesses, everyone is included. Next slide, please. And again, this is how it works. You can tell we get this question a lot, so we kind of reiterate it throughout the presentation. Santa Barbara buys carbon-free energy for our entire service territory, which is within the city of Santa Barbara. Edison delivers the energy to your location, and the community gets to benefit from reduced carbon emissions, better environment, local investments, and overall community engagement in the climate struggle. Next slide, please. So here are those options again. So we're defaulting our whole community at 100% green. This is pretty different than most other CCEs have done. We are coming in at a higher quality product at a slight premium. Historically, community choice energy aggregators have tried to undercut the incumbent utility, and we went a different approach. We said, actually, the renewable and the carbon-free attributes are much more important to our community, and they're willing to pay a little bit more for that. So we are, as I mentioned, defaulting everyone in at a 100% carbon-free, greenhouse gas-free energy. It'll cost the average residential customer about $5 more a month. For commercial customers, clearly that premium is a little bit higher. It's still 1.2 cents per kilowatt hour across all of the rate classes, but because you're paying so much more, you're buying so much more energy, your premium is a bit higher. Ultimately, though, it's much less than converting your entire on-site supply to renewable. Next slide, please. For those who can't or don't want their bill to increase, there is an opt-down option called the Green Start option. This is still greener than Edison's power mix, at least 50% renewable, at the exact same rates as Edison. And by the rate setting policy, these rates are always set to Edison's rates. So even if Edison's rates go up or down, these rates go up or down, they stay exactly the same. So in every scenario, your bill would be the same as if you opted back out to Edison. Those who are on the income qualified financial assistance programs are also opted into this so that they can maintain their low income benefits. They still have the option to increase to the 100% carbon-free content at that premium, but in order to maintain their benefits, they are opted in here. Next slide, please. And because resilience, local energy resilience is critical to all of the work that we're doing in terms of reliability, we also wanted to encourage folks to install solar and battery storage at their homes or businesses. So we are paying more than Southern California Edison for what's called the net surplus compensation rate. So if you generate more than you use throughout the year on your solar array, we will pay you over double what Edison pays you as a bill credit. So it is a benefit to stay into the program. Net metering customers who are already net metering customers with Edison don't need to take an action. They're automatically enrolled in Resilient and reap the benefits of this program. They are defaulted into the 100% green for that remaining energy that they buy. But again, because they're buying so many less kilowatt hours, their premium, their total cost increase monthly is much less because they're not buying as much energy. They can also opt down to Green Start though. Next slide, please. What are the benefits of staying with Santa Barbara Clean Energy? Well, you get to choose your level of clean energy, and this is really important to a lot of our community members. They've been asking for this for a long time. You get to make more from your solar and help fight local climate change and build resilience. You get to save with incentives and programs that we'll talk about in a little bit, and you really get to work with us to meet local climate goals. Next slide, please. So just showing you the visual timeline of when all of these decisions were made. In June 2017 was when council adopted that renewable electricity goal. And then a few years later decided to move forward with a city-only community choice energy entity, Santa Barbara Clean Energy. In September of last year, they adopted their carbon neutrality goal by 2035, which we'll talk about in a moment. And as I mentioned, the residential sector will launch in October of this year, so 2 short weeks away. And the commercial and municipal sectors will launch in March of 2022. Next slide, please. Really, this is a way for us to have a bigger impact, especially on that carbon neutrality goal. This pie chart on the left shows you where our emission sources are in Santa Barbara. We have about 40% of emissions related to energy use, and that is largely building energy use, and it's broken down about half and half between electricity and gas. So this yellow piece of the pie, once the CCE launches, will essentially be carbon free. So we've immediately eliminated 20% of our total carbon emissions just by implementing community choice energy. About 4% of this pie here is waste to landfills. That is essentially eliminated with the launch of the resource center that's currently happening at the Tahigas landfill. So that will go away. And then it gives us almost an entire pie that is transportation. Well, community choice energy and its carbon-free electricity offering really offers for the first time an opportunity to decarbonize that. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. And so then we're looking at the natural gas piece. And this was a lot of the reason why we did, council did pass the ordinance prohibiting new natural gas infrastructure to mitigate those future emissions. And then we'll look at a different approach to existing buildings. How might we encourage our local constituency to transition their appliances to electric and leverage this clean electricity? Next slide, please. We are the first CCE in the state to launch with programs. I'm very proud of our team in the Energy and Climate Division and how they've leveraged local partners, including the Water Division, to offer some really exciting bonuses to Santa Barbara Clean Energy customers. Right out the gate, we've already talked about how we pay you more for solar energy. We're also doing some cool induction cooktop demo kits through the Library of Things at the Central Library. This is to help encourage that building electrification process. We've negotiated a deal with B-Cycle, our electric bicycle rental system here in Santa Barbara, for a 20% off annual memberships for Santa Barbara Clean Energy customers. We're working with the Tri-County Regional Energy Network, which is a local energy network, and the Water Conservation Team to offer free home energy audits and a limited amount of flume water monitors to customers who sign up for these audits. And then we've negotiated discounted battery pricing with local battery company Simplify that's out of Ojai. And they're offering really generous discounts, $50 per kilowatt hour, which is up to $7,000 per system for those that want to install these batteries on their home systems. We're also negotiating electric vehicle discounts, solar discounts, and some turnkey installation programs. So there's some really exciting things coming down the pipe. Next slide, please. So why is CCE so important to council's goals? Really, I can't underscore this enough. It's the fact that it's opt-out versus opt-in. If we were requiring everyone in Santa Barbara to take an action to go renewable, it would be very challenging for us to do this. So the fact that everyone in one fell swoop is brought into the system helps us accomplish the council goal. I have this chart here to show you, we really have ultimate control over the city's energy accounts, but they only account for about 8% of the total municipal load. You can see this pie chart on the left that shows the entire community in dark blue, and then the municipal pie slice is pretty small. So that's what we have direct purview over. So it's really important that it's this opt-out scenario. We get to choose the energy content, the renewable content of this electricity, which is really critical. And then any excess revenues that are realized by this enterprise get reinvested locally as opposed to distributed throughout the Edison territory or to Edison shareholders. We get to decide through our city council's open, public, and transparent process how we reinvest those here locally. And I think that's really important. We also get to choose how to set our generation rates and how they're relevant to our community. So that's important. And then we get to fund local projects and programs. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for water? Well, in March of 2022, all One Water accounts will be auto-enrolled into 100% green, with the expectation that they'll stay at that level. Now, this does relate to an electrical cost. And for the industrial sector, which is most of the water accounts, this is anticipated to be a 9 to 11% increase. The industrial sector is highly subsidized by the residential sector, and that's why you're seeing a greater increase for this with that 1.2 cent premium than you would for the residential sector. It's important to keep in mind that with this premium, you're getting a much cleaner product. You're basically running on carbon-free electricity, and that's excellent. So that also accounts for about 4% of Santa Barbara's total, the community's total electrical use. And so it does have a fairly significant impact. It also opens up generation potential. I mentioned earlier that water has some sites that we could potentially develop in conjunction with the water operations for energy storage or generation. Because currently we can't build energy generation that's more than what's used on site very easily. We're very limited. But with CCE, the CCE, Santa Barbara Clean Energy, could build the system in what's called an in front of the meter scenario, where we're basically borrowing or leasing the land to build this system, and then would be able to generate at a utility scale, which gets us better costing. So there's could be some great benefits for water. Next slide, please. Carbon neutrality. So I've talked about this a little bit already. Next slide. The council is aiming for carbon neutral by 2035. And for those of you working in the climate space, oh, Joshua, did you want me to pause?
Just pause. I just want to pause and make sure that was really great information, really helpful. And just wanted to pause really quickly before we jump into this next section and see if the commissioners or have any questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great presentation. I was totally into it, so I wasn't going to interrupt. Commissioner Young and then Commissioner Kameyer. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just curious about one thing. Does having this community-wide energy system create a disincentive for homeowners to want to install their own PV systems?
Thank you, Commissioner Young. We don't believe so for a couple of reasons. One, we are incentivizing folks to install solar PV systems through the Resilient program by paying them more. It's a revenue potential for them. Additionally, Santa Barbara Clean Energy's carbon-free electricity offering doesn't provide any backup generation for your home. So if you wanted to have resilience in an outage, you would still want to put solar PV and a battery in your home. And we want to encourage folks to do that.
But if let's say I don't have any panels on my home right now, but to go ahead and put panels on could cost me, over $10,000, which would be a small, it's probably greater than that. But once I'm part of the city's energy plan, I don't have to put up panels at all. And I'm going to be participating in the plan, which will be providing, carbon-free electricity. So
yes.
that's what I mean by the disincentive. I mean, it's great if I don't have to spend any money to put up panels and I can just sit back now and participate.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Young. And you're spot on. This is actually the point of community choice energy is for the carbon-free electricity, you're right. No one needs to put panels on their home because we're already procuring that power on their behalf. Now, if their motivation for panels is backup power or to mitigate their energy costs, right? They might want to put a solar and battery storage to move their energy usage around based on time of use rates, then that is still an attractive option. We are finding with the tax credits that are available at the federal level, plus the time of use incentives for moving your electricity around, plus the resilient net surplus compensation rate, that it is still very much a good economic proposition to install solar plus storage at your home if you have that upfront capital to invest.
Okay, and then you mentioned the Laurel floating solar potential. What about all of the city's buildings? Are they being looked at as potential sites or not?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Young. Absolutely, all of our buildings are being looked at, and we have already built a large number of systems. Almost all of our fire stations have solar arrays on them. Our downtown corporate yard has solar arrays. We're currently building a 500 kilowatt system at the Granada garage, and continuing to look for more opportunities. As I just mentioned in the previous slide, we're very hamstrung by the current rules with our Edison relationship, which is we cannot overbuild at a site. We can't export to the grid, so we have to build up to 80% of the on-site load, and that is what it's just a net metering rule with Edison. Now, as the community choice energy entity forms, we can build what's called in front of the meter projects, basically utility projects that the CCE owns, and it really replaces some of our contracted electricity procurements. So then we have more opportunity to build out the city buildings, to really take advantage of the full roof space, which makes it a much better economic proposition. It's really expensive to build small solar arrays on municipal buildings versus larger scale arrays.
I just want to chime in. That's really important for water resources because for years we've identified some of our reservoirs as being great sites for solar, but we actually have very little power needs at our reservoirs. Usually water is pumped up from another location to our reservoir and then gravity feeds out of there. And so we've been kind of hamstrung with, yeah, that would be a great site, but SCE is not going to buy off on us producing any power there. So with this change, we're now kind of unleashed from that. We can then go on to explore really putting solar panels in as part of these projects, putting them on the roofs and being able to be a net producer. So it's a small caveat, but it's a big change in how it impacts water resources.
Thank you.
Good. Commissioner Cameron, Cora.
Thank you. And thanks so much for this presentation. This is very exciting and really been fun for me to hear about. So thanks for that. I'm going to try and limit my questions. I had a lot written down. I'm not going to ask all of them. But I did want to ask if there had been any pushback from Edison on CCE, because as you were saying, I know that there's been some limitations and challenges with distributed energy. So yeah, could you speak to that?
Thank you, Commissioner Kemmeier. So this is a sensitive question to answer. Overtly, no, there has not been any pushback with SCE. Historically, actually, SCE has been the easiest, quote unquote, and easiest is sort of a euphemism, investor-owned utility to work with. PG&E was the first investor-owned utility to have CCAs form in their territory, and out of the gates, they did not behave. And they got slapped pretty heavily by the California Public Utilities Commission, and a bunch of rulings came out, and the code of conduct, which governs the relationship between CCAs and the utilities, that really limited what the investor-owned utilities can do. So for example, they are not allowed during this phase that we're in now to lobby against CCAs. They are not actually even allowed to speak on behalf of CCAs. So they're generally on board with that. We've had a few hiccups in our enrollment that were accidents on Edison's part that they are taking quick steps to remediate that did violate the code of conduct in some ways, but because they were accidents, we're trying to work with them. But ultimately, no. And the reason for that is technically, based on the rate setting rules, generation is supposed to be a pass-through cost for the investor-owned utilities. They are not supposed to profit off of it. And so this should not be a loss of revenue to them. Now, because utilities have developed their own generation assets over years and have employed many employees to work those assets, that is what's being threatened with CCAs. And so that's where the tension comes from. Ultimately, we're confident that we can move forward with them. They're generally very on board and established in this.
Thank you. But then I had one more question on the CCE program, and then one last one around kind of the water energy from the beginning of your presentation. Could you speak a little bit to how you're planning on communicating the CCE program to residents as it rolls out next month?
Yeah, so we're already in the throes of that. By law, we have to send out 4 mailers, 2 pre-enrollment and 2 post-enrollment. So anyone who lives in the city of Santa Barbara should have already received 2 mailers by now. That explain the program and has a very lengthy boilerplate language on the back. So I apologize for that. That is required by the PUC. And so those are the foundational mailers that go out. In addition, we've participated in a large number of community meetings. It's really interesting. We're launching at the exact same time as everyone around us is running Central Coast Community Energy. So there's some confusion around that. So we've been doing joint presentations with them, which has been very effective. We are also hosting a webinar next Thursday for the community, which was included on that second mailer. So we're hoping to get a lot of folks to that. And then just generally trying to do press releases. We're doing a promotional video and trying to get the word out as much as we can.
Thanks. And then final question around the kind of embedded energy in water. You spoke to this on the utility side, but I was wondering, and this might be more of a water department question, efforts around kind of messaging and potential rebates to get at end use energy embedded in water, especially around hot water uses.
Go ahead and tackle that one, Commissioner Kammeier. That's actually something I've been pretty passionately following and working with a professor at UCSB on, because it's quite remarkable that the majority of energy used in water is actually in a small portion of it to heat, and I think that's what you're getting at. It's and something I'm happy to dig into if the commission's desire to talk about, but the ability of the community to reduce the amount of water that they heat up in their home has the largest impact actually on energy used in water. We had looked at a molecule of desalinated water treated and pumped to someone's home represents a third of the energy in the total water delivered to the home. Just heating a small portion represented 2/3 of the energy in that water. And so really trying to continue to focus on having awareness of just how much energy it really takes to heat up water at home and trying to minimize that, particularly for washing clothes where a lot of the detergents nowadays don't need that. But I appreciate that. There's a huge element of education that could occur in that area that would really help reduce our overall community's energy usage.
Thank you.
Really good question, and something we can talk about more detail at a later time. Any other questions from the commission at this point? Okay, Ms. Parento, go ahead.
All right, so as I mentioned, council is aiming for carbon neutral by 2035, which anyone in the climate space knows is like tomorrow. So we're at an all-out sprint to try and figure out how to make meaningful progress on this goal. Community choice energy gets us a long ways down the field towards this. I'm going to go into that in a little bit here. Next slide. So really how we're strategizing to get there is through an updated climate action plan. Our last climate action plan was written in 2012 and was really one of the first in the state. So writing the book on climate action plans, we've learned a lot in the almost 10 years after that. And so we expect this plan to be quite a bit different than that one and much more ambitious. But basically this plan will outline strategies for emissions reductions and will coordinate with other city plans because as you know, we have lots of plans throughout the city. And the really key piece that's different from the last plan is we'll have an implementation strategy. Who is responsible to implement and when will this be implemented? And so that will be really helpful, not only for staff, but also for council when making budget decisions. They'll be able to see the timeline and associated budget. Next slide, please. Our main goals for the climate action plan are equity and inclusion. This is a really, really significant topic in the whole climate space. We're finding really no surprise that frontline communities and disadvantaged communities are the hardest hit by climate change. And so we really want to ensure that not only are they being protected through these climate strategies, but that they are being disproportionately impacted by the strategies. And so that's really top of mind for us. We're also really focused on creating community capacity. I think we all understand that we need the community to take action in order to achieve the goal and to really build that capacity for action as well as resilience in a disaster. We'll be focusing on the 3 primary sources of emissions that I pointed out earlier in the presentation, which are transportation, energy, and solid waste. Next slide, please. We are very well aware that there is no silver bullet to hitting carbon neutrality. And so this is really going to be a multifaceted plan that looks at behavior change, infrastructure investments we can make, creative financing strategies to help folks accomplish their climate goals, policy decisions at the council level, and then that capacity building I was just mentioning. Next slide. So these are the emissions. We already went through this earlier in the presentation. The last greenhouse gas inventory that we put together as a city was in 2015. So a little outdated. We're doing a new one now for a new transportation model. But these numbers, the percentages are roughly still the same. Next slide. So going back to how Santa Barbara Clean Energy plays into this, that influx of carbon-free electricity opens up two pathways to those two big emission sources. One is building electrification and one is vehicle electrification. So whereas today we have no meaningful way to decarbonize buildings and vehicles, this is what this carbon-free electricity allows us to. So in terms of building electrification, we've already sort of checked the box on new buildings. We're not allowing green or natural gas infrastructure in new buildings. And that, coupled with the carbon-free content of Santa Barbara Clean Energy's electricity, essentially decarbonizes all new buildings. For existing buildings, you know, we in no way want to take a stick approach with existing buildings. We want to encourage folks to move to the all-electrical space through incentives, education, and some hand-holding. And we are already working with many regional partners to develop some really amazing ways to accomplish that in the near future. This is a state priority, and so there's a lot of support statewide for it, and looking forward to moving forward on that. With vehicle electrification, you know, this is there's sort of a twofold issue. One is getting enough infrastructure in the ground so folks feel comfortable that they will be able to charge. And so we are actively working on that. We recently applied to 3 different funding sources for over 140 electric vehicle charging stations throughout the city, a mixture of both level 2 and level 3 chargers. The 3 are the fast chargers. And then encouraging electric vehicle adoption. So partnering this investment in infrastructure with rebates and incentives to buy an electric vehicle, with electric rates that encourage electric vehicle charging, and with smart programs downtown that allow the specific use cases where we want electric vehicle drivers to use their electric vehicle to flourish. So for example, if we have a lot of commuters from far away, say Ventura or Lompoc, they may be less inclined to drive their electric vehicle if they can't park it in one place all day and charge it. So we're piloting at the Granada Garage right now. We have a lot of chargers on the roof. We're piloting a workforce charging program where you do not need to move your vehicle when you're finished actively charging. So you can plug in your vehicle at the beginning of the day, or you don't even need to plug it in. It's actually just an EV parking permit that is subsidized. It's half the cost of a standard monthly permit. So we're trying this out to see if this helps encourage the commuters to adopt EVs. And that's just an example of policy or program changes we can make. Next slide, please. So again, you know, the building decarbonization, let's leverage this carbon-free electricity. Let's avoid natural gas infrastructure in new buildings, and then transition our existing buildings over to all electric as feasible, with the 2 primary appliances being space heating and water heating, as Joshua just mentioned. Those are the 2 big natural gas users. So transitioning away from those as quickly as possible is a big priority. Next slide, please. Oh, there you go. That's our carbon emissions. Next slide. For vehicle decarbonization, I pretty much just said this. We're just making sure that the infrastructure and incentives are in place for EV adoption, but also investing in active transportation infrastructure so that walking and biking is just as convenient and attractive of a choice for those that are willing to do that, because active transportation is a big piece of that transportation emissions reduction. Next slide, please. So what are we doing with the fleet specifically, the city fleet? We are working on an electric vehicle master plan that includes a fleet transition within it, and we're working with the fleet group on that. Really a big challenge for the fleet is the medium and heavy duty vehicles, which to date have not really had an electric vehicle component. That is changing. The Ford F-150 is coming out later next year. And is a very exciting proposition for us. It would replace most of our medium duty vehicles. And so we're excited about trying that out. For the police vehicles, the interesting thing about those is that typically they don't have enough onboard energy storage to accommodate the onboard electrical systems. So the computers that they're running and all the idle time that they're doing. So they would be fine for pursuit and just general driving of the beat, but they aren't good for those idle and onboard electrical systems. So that's the piece that we're figuring out with police. We are currently applying for infrastructure funding to try these new technologies. Particularly, we're applying for fast chargers at our downtown fleet lot, which would allow for multiple use case pilots, including pull-through charging, quick charging. They're located at the same place as the gas pumps, and so it would be very minimal impact to someone who's already coming to fill their car. So we're really excited about trying that out. We hope we receive that funding. Next slide, please. What does this mean for water? It means your operations are basically decarbonized as of March of 2022. And it means we have an opportunity to decarbonize your transportation section. So a lot of the water vehicles, but not all of them, are medium duty vehicles. And so having some viable options in the electric space is really exciting. It'll also be an opportunity to test new technologies. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to be a little bit of a risk taker on, is trying out some things that are promising in the decarbonization space, and water might be willing to do that. And so more to come on that. Next slide, please. We have launched our Together to Zero campaign related to this goal. We really think this is a community partnership, and in order to achieve the goal, we're going to have everyone on board. So we have this fun campaign that we've launched, and you can read more about it at our sustainability website. Next slide. And last but not least, climate adaptation. Next slide. So we have several areas of focus in terms of climate adaptation. Climate adaptation is really for the changes, the impacts of climate change we've already seen. How do we mitigate so we don't feel the worst of those impacts? So the areas that we're focusing on are sea level rise, drought, extreme heat, wildfire, and food insecurity. So sea level rise, I think you've been brought along a little bit with the sea level rise implementation plan. Drought, you're clearly very involved with, and so looking for ways to partner on the adaptation strategies. Extreme heat is one that's less focused on currently, and we're sort of figuring that out through the hazard mitigation program. Fire's been taking the lead on, but we're getting involved with, and then food insecurity is being tackled at the regional level. Next slide, please. So the adaptation next steps, we did just hire a dedicated staff person who will be looking at adaptation measures. So Melissa Hedrick, who is the program lead for the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan, did just join the Energy and Climate Division. We're really excited about it. And she will be kicking off the implementation of the plan. So the very first steps were developing a work plan, like what are we doing next? And then a shoreline monitoring program, and she'll be spearheading that. And then also working within the interdepartmental team to make sure everyone's got their ducks in a row and has the support they need to move forward. She's also going to actively look for funding opportunities to get some of these measures paid for, because they're very expensive, as you can imagine. And then she will be co-collaborating with the Office of Emergency Management at the city to update that city's hazard mitigation plan. Next slide, please. So for One Water, this means that you have a dedicated support staff for your adaptation needs, and that's really exciting. She'll be assembling that internal stakeholder group, as I mentioned, because sea level rise is touching several departments, as you can imagine. She'll be working to establish triggers for sea level rise related actions, like when do we move El Estero? So that'll be really important to have, and we'll sort of inform the rest of the implementation. We'll be working with you to evaluate infrastructure and alternatives as we work to adapt to climate change, and then help with capital project planning. So, the current water rates don't account for some of these longer term infrastructure needs, and so working with you to try to forecast what those might be. Next slide, please. So how does all of this that I just presented to you fit together? Well, basically it all works together to make us the safest, cleanest, locally resilient community possible, where folks are able to thrive in the face of adversity. And so we are really excited about all of these pieces and how they're fitting together, and working throughout the city organization and the community to be building this local resilience. Next slide. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Well, I gotta just thank you very much for a really exciting presentation. And I gotta say that I am really proud to be part of a city that basically is stepping out as strongly as they are in all these areas. and appreciate you bringing it all together. Councilmember Cinda and I were part of the Sea Level Rise Committee, and Ms. Hetrick is a really great staff person, and I'm really pleased to see that she's going to continue those efforts. So thank you for that. So I'm going to go Commissioner Kammeier and then to Commissioner Young. Cora, go ahead.
Thank you. So I again have two questions. One around the climate adaptation areas of focus. I was wondering about flood risk outside of sea level rise, and I know that that is something that Creeks Division works on from a stormwater management perspective, but that also seems to have an important climate adaptation nexus as well.
Yeah, and so we are thank you, Commissioner Kammeier. We're predominantly focusing on that through the sea level rise lens currently, but you're absolutely right that the 100-year storms create, flooding in other areas than in the coastal zone. And so we will be looking at all of those. And that is included in the hazard mitigation plan. The hazard mitigation plan takes a really macro approach to various hazards that can threaten Santa Barbara. And so it is part of that piece of work.
Thank you. And then my second question, which I'm not sure if you really are going to have an answer to this, but I think I just can't help but observe and wonder, like, we have this awesome carbon neutrality program within the city, and then at the same time we still have prospective oil development in the channel. And I just, maybe there's nothing within your job description that addresses that, but I just wanted to put that comment out there and see if you have any thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Kammeier. We don't have any purview over the oil and gas leases or the transport of the oil and gas up and down the 101 corridor, but the city has taken a fairly aggressive stance against these developments, and I think that's sort of the limitation of what we can do. I don't know if I see that both Councilmember Friedman and Sneddon are on the call. I don't know if they want to weigh in on that, but really that's outside of our purview and on the Caltrans and county dockets.
Yeah, just one note that after the oil spill in '69, there was a prohibition area, the entire city jurisdiction, which projects out into the ocean, equal to the size of the land side of the city, is prohibited from any oil and gas drilling, as it is anywhere else within the city itself. That's in the city charter. Okay.
Thanks, Commissioner Davis.
Thank you for the question. Commissioner Young.
Thank you. Just a great presentation. I just want to thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I see there is so much here that really could be unpacked with all of the different plans that are involved. But I'm curious as to how and whether staff is involved in collaborating with other municipalities to check and see what they're working on, how they're doing it, whether there's anything to be gleaned from successes and failures outside of our jurisdiction.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. What a great question. And my philosophy is, I don't want to reinvent the wheel if I don't have to. So I am constantly looking to our neighboring communities to see what they've done and how can we implement it here and make it better. And we've been very successful to date doing that over the 15 years that the energy program, or 10 years that the energy programs existed. As a team, we are very plugged into a statewide network of energy and climate practitioners, and we meet with them regularly. And on the more regional level, we are members of the Santa Barbara County Regional Climate Collaborative. That's a foundational collaborative. It's 2 years old. I'm actually the steering committee chair, so we have a very active role in it. And that has been very promising for affecting regional action, right? So the city can make all of these broad goals and take aggressive action, but if our neighboring regions aren't doing it, then we're not having as much of an impact as we could. And so the benefit of the collaborative is that we're really able to leverage each of our individual skills and resources and maximize that impact regionally. We've already applied for funding as a region, as a collaborative, for resilience hubs, for example, for carbon drawdown markets, for things that are really innovative and exciting, and that as an individual team, we probably don't have the time, capacity, or skills to implement, but as a wider coalition, we really do. And so that, I'd say, is where we're focusing that attention currently.
Is there any type of national organization of some sort where these topics, get
there are several, and I think the most beneficial to us that we are members of is the United States Sustainability Directors Network, which not only has events that there are presentations, it has working groups on the specific climate and sustainability topics. And then it has a Q&A forum. So if, for example, 2 weeks ago, I went and asked if anybody had an employee EV charging program that they could share. And then you get cities from around the country that respond with their challenges and successes. And so that's been very, very productive.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Are there any other questions from the commission? Councilmember Snedden.
And thank you, Chair Davis. Is this a time for comments or did you just want questions?
Oh, it's all questions and comments. I'm sorry, I should have said that. Questions and comments, please.
Yeah, this is such an incredible presentation, Ms. Prento. And when I think about, as Chair Davis mentioned, we've sat on Sea Level Rise Committee, and I know Councilmember Friedman is here as well, and then on Sustainability Committee, and then Water Commission, and then to have members of Water Commission come and inform the Sea Level Rise Committee, and then we don't know exactly how that all ties back in, and we've all asked for this sort of connected, overarching vision. And what you've done right here today is we've heard some of these pieces individually, and then every time I hear this presentation, there's more that you've done, and it's just incredible. We're in such good hands with you in this department, and I'm very grateful, and especially for the attention now to tying it back to each of the departments and explaining specifically for water, and just really well done, and thank you.
Here, here. Other comments, questions? Let me go quickly and say if there's any public comment, Joshua, and I'll come back to you. Is there any public comment, Madam Clerk?
Chair Davis, there is no public comment at this time.
Great, thank you. Mr. Hagmar.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about Ms. Parenteau's work here, and one of it has really been how she's approached it. It has really been, I think, powerful, and something the commission and council don't see. Is she's really embedded herself in our group and water resources. She looks and acts just like a water resources staff member, and she's part of the team. She really just threw herself in at El Estero and really, how can I help? How can I bring resources and money to help solve some of the challenges that the staff are up against? Because one of the things I've recognized is we all embrace our role as protecting the environment, being resilient and sustainable is all what embodies, I think, water resources staff. And she's come in and kind of helped amplify that with her skill set and her knowledge. And it's just been really, really powerful. And we've really appreciated having her involved, and look forward to where we're headed in the future with that. So something the commission doesn't see, the public doesn't see, but just really appreciate her efforts and that of her staff now that she's developing to really just be part of our team. She's not telling us what to do. She's really just aiding our staff who are really excited about where we're headed. So it's really a great collaboration. So thank you. Thank you for all your support.
Okay, Commissioner Young.
I was just going to mention that I listened to a podcast that Leah Stokes authors called A Matter of Degrees. And they were talking about the REACH code and getting natural gas infrastructure out of new buildings. And lo and behold, they mentioned Ms. Parenteau and the great job that she did and how prepared she was in dealing with the community and the different angles that were coming before, council with this. So it was nice.
Yeah, I gotta say, I've worked with Alelia for over a decade, and we are blessed to have her here in the community leading these programs. And I think, as Councilmember Snedden has indicated, really brings everybody together. And as Joshua indicated, basically we're part of a team, and we're great to have you as taking the lead in this regard. And today, thank you so much for the presentation. Anything else you want to say to us at this point? Because again, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the kind words, but I could not do any of this without the water team support. All the wastewater, water treatment, water distribution staff has been nothing but on board with all of the crazy stuff we throw at them. So it's not due to me that we've done these exciting things, it's due to them. And I really appreciate that collaboration. It's been really fun to learn about the water system. And so many kudos to them, and also my growing team, who I keep throwing new challenges at them and they keep rising to the occasion. And so I'm really excited about all these things to come. I'm excited to be part of the water team, like Joshua said, and just excited about our future. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, feel free to come back and inform us at any time as to your progress. And if we can have, be a part, if the commission can be a part in any way in reaching out to the community, let us know. Again, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today. Okay, we're going to move then to item 6C. This is the desalination conveyance main pipeline project update. Hagmark,
All right.
open it up
Thank
for
you.
us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davis. Commissioners, glad to be here today and happy to introduce Ashley Hsu, who's our new principal engineer, overseeing all of water resources engineering work. And she's going to be providing a presentation, kind of a kickstart to an outreach that we're going to be doing for the desal conveyance pipeline that we've been talking about now for, it seems like, years. But we're finally to that point where we're going to start seeing some physical work out there and wanting to just give you guys a sneak peek of what's to come and answer a bunch of questions related to this important project that will build on resiliency in our community and also help to improve water quality throughout the entire water system. So please take it away, Ashley.
Well, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Davis and members of the commission. My name is Ashley Hsu, Principal Civil Engineer with the City's Public Works Department. And as Mr. Hagmark mentioned, I'll be giving a project update on the desalination conveyance pipeline, or what we've branded as the Desal Link project. This item is for information only. No action is needed on your part today. Next slide, please. This is a quick overview of my presentation today. I will discuss some of the project benefits, get into some detail about what to expect during construction. I will touch on project funding and then close with an opportunity to answer any questions. Next slide, please. So the Desal Link project really is an important project for both our community and for our region. The project will connect multiple city water sources by installing nearly 2 miles of brand new 24-inch underground pipeline to connect the Charles E. Meyer desalination plant and the Cater water treatment plant. This new pipeline, in conjunction with several other projects that are in progress, will enable desalinated water to reach our entire service area. And by doing this, it really improves not only the city's resiliency, but also resiliency within the entire region, and means that we'll be able to provide continuous water service even during an extreme emergency. And as a secondary benefit, we do expect an increase in our water quality and uniformity due to blending desalinated water with the city's other water sources. Next slide, please. The Desal Link project is the first of 4 projects that will complete the ultimate connection between the desal plant and Cater. The Desal Link alignment is shown in the blue line on the graphic on the screen. The second project is the transmission main renewal phase 1 project shown in the magenta line on the graphic. And this project will address operational deficiencies along the existing transmission main by repairing and replacing valves, including some really large 24-inch valves along the alignment, piping, and various appurtenances. And construction of that project is expected to be underway this winter and wrapped up next spring. The third project is the desal product water pump station upgrade project down at the desal plant. And that project will upgrade the existing pumps by replacing them with higher powered pumps that will enable the water to get pumped all the way up to the Cater treatment plant. And that project is expected to be completed in the fall of 2022. And finally, the last piece is the Cater Yard Piping Project, which is actually a smaller component of a larger project that was recently presented to you. And that is the Cater Reservoir Resiliency Project that is just starting in preliminary design. And that the yard piping portion of the project will complete the piping that's needed within the Cater property itself to connect to the existing transmission main and connect that to the clear well at Cater so that the desalinated water can get distributed throughout the entire system. And construction of that last portion of work is expected in 2024-25. I did want to mention that even without that final piece of the yard piping up at Cater, being able to pump desalinated water all the way up to Foothill Road by the end of 2022 will enable the desal water to be distributed through a much wider service area than we're currently able to do. Next slide, please. The desal link construction team is being led by the city's project manager, Carson Woolert, who is a supervising civil engineer with the city. He's been with the city for about 10 years now, and he will be the primary point of contact during construction. And he'll be managing both the construction contractor and all of the various support contracts. I had hoped to introduce him to you on the screen this morning, but unfortunately he's not available due to a conflict. M&S engineers will be providing full-time construction management and inspection services. So they will really be the eyes and ears for us out in the field, making sure that the contractor is building the project in compliance with our plans and specifications. Toro Enterprises out of Oxnard will be our construction contractor. And then we have a variety of other support services in order to implement the project. And I'm not going to go into detail on each contract, but I did want to highlight environmental monitoring because it's a little bit unique for this project. There's two primary components. The first is archaeological monitoring, and that is actually required because of the depth of excavation that we will be doing as part of this project. It's unique in the sense that most of our projects we're excavating within previously disturbed area, but due to the depth of this new pipeline, we will be excavating in previously undisturbed areas, and the requirement to provide archaeological monitoring while we're excavating in those previously undisturbed areas was required as part of our environmental review. The other component of our environmental monitoring is monitoring for contaminated soils. We do have the potential to encounter contamination, especially in the commercial and industrial areas. And so this will require monitoring and removal and remediation if we do encounter those. Next slide, please. This is another graphic of our pipeline alignment. The dark blue line shows the desal link alignment. Work is planned to begin at the Garden and Mission intersection and work down toward the desal plant. Again, it's approximately a 2-mile alignment, and this does present some construction challenges. This is a pretty complex project, and our team has put a lot of thought and planning into how to execute the work in order to limit disruption to our community and balancing that with the number of restrictions put on the contractor, because the more restrictions we place on the contractor, the longer the work is going to take and the more expensive it becomes. As I mentioned, this project is unique, especially from our typical water main replacement projects in a number of different ways, including the deeper excavation, which I mentioned. We're digging, on average, our trench will be about 10 feet deep, whereas our typical projects were in the 5 to 6 foot range. And actually at its deepest point on this project will be at 17 feet at the intersection of Calle Cesar Chavez and Yananali. So that requires additional space for the contractor to work safely. It means that the work will be slower and working with extra care as we're working around a lot of existing utilities within the open trench. We're also working with a larger diameter pipe. We're putting in a new 24-inch line, and that is larger than our typical water main replacements, where we're putting in 8 to 12-inch lines. So again, that means a wider trench. It's increased time required to maneuver the larger pipeline and get that placed within the trench. And again, this is a much longer alignment than we typically take on with our normal water main replacement projects. Our water main replacement projects are typically 3 miles in total, but that's spread throughout multiple different areas in the city. So the impact is essentially diffused throughout a variety of different neighborhoods. But in this case, the impact is more concentrated along a continuous alignment. Next slide, please. So construction is scheduled to start next month in October, and we're expecting a duration of about 1 year. Of course, that'll be dependent on the weather this winter. We're all hoping for some good rain this year, but acknowledge that that will slow work down a bit. The first item of work for our contractor will be potholing to locate existing utilities and completing pre-construction video inspections of all of some of our existing utilities, including sewer lines and storm drains. The trenching will then begin at the intersection of Mission and Garden, as I mentioned, and work down toward the desal plant. Most of the work will be taking place during business hours in order to avoid nighttime disruptions to residential areas. But we are going to be planning some night work within the commercial areas in order to limit disruptions to businesses during working hours. And that will also help limit disruptions to commercial deliveries during business hours for those businesses along the alignment. The construction crews will be working in 3 block sections, and each section will take about 6 weeks to complete. And dividing the project into these 3 block sections will allow the contractor to work more efficiently. It'll provide them with enough space to be staging their equipment and materials. And during active construction on those 3 block sections, they will be closed to through traffic, and on-street parking will be restricted, again, to provide the contractor with the space that they need. However, local access will be provided, and driveway access will be provided to the extent possible, although there will be disruptions when active construction is taking place directly in front of a driveway. For example, when the contractor is actively digging the trench or placing pipe within the trench in front of a driveway, there will be disruptions. Outside of business hours, driveway access will be provided to all residents and businesses. And emergency access will be maintained at all times. And of course, our construction manager and city project manager, Carson Wooler, will be available to work with residents and businesses on any special circumstances that arise. We anticipate those, and they are available to help as needed. The last step for our contractor in completing each 3 block section will be to complete the final paving restoration and striping, so that the goal is once they've completed the work on a 3 block section, they don't have to return. Barring any unforeseen circumstances or warranty work that they may have to do. But really the goal is to help limit the disruption to a particular, to that time frame, so that residents and businesses aren't disturbed by multiple mobilizations within those 3 blocks. Next slide, please. So our new pipeline, because of the depth that it will be at, it will be below most existing utilities, which means our contractor is going to have to work with a lot of extra care around all of the existing utilities as they excavate. And we took a lot of time and put a lot of consideration into making sure that private sewer laterals and water line connections are maintained throughout the project. So as a result, we're taking a number of steps, including our contractor will be completing pre and post construction videos of both the private sewer laterals and our public sewer mains. And the videos of the private laterals will be made available to property owners for their laterals, so that they have a record of the condition both before and after construction. While the trench is exposed or is excavated and the utilities are exposed, visual inspections will also take place of the private laterals and water service lines. And any lines that are identified to be compromised or that they will be impacted will be replaced by the city's contractor at that time. Next slide, please. We've partnered with Ayers and Associates, who are public outreach consultants, to develop an outreach plan for both before and during construction that we've already started rolling out. Our team developed a fact sheet that was mailed to approximately 1,000 property owners and residents along the entire alignment. And that fact sheet provides some of the basic project information, contact information, and also announced our public webinar, which is upcoming. And information both during and before and during construction will be disseminated in a variety of formats, including signage out in the field along the project alignment, utilizing nextdoor.com, our city news and brief newsletter, which is our weekly city email newsletter, and our project website, which we've developed. And our virtual public webinar to inform the public and answer any questions will be on September 29th at 6 p.m. And on the screen is our project website where anyone who's interested can register for that webinar. And the webinar will be recorded in case anyone's not able to join the live broadcast, and it will be posted on our project website. Next slide. The total construction cost of the desal link project is approximately $18.6 million, and it's funded through a variety of funding sources, starting with $1 million grant that we received from the Integrated Regional Water Management Program, and that is administered through the State Department of Water Resources, which then locally is administered through the county. The city also received approximately $14 million of disaster settlement funds from SCE as a result of impacts to the city caused by the Thomas Fire. And so that amount has been applied toward the project. And the balance of the project is being covered by water fund, previously appropriated water fund reserves. As part of the water sales agreement with Montecito Water District that was approved, they will share in 65% of the costs for the desal link project. The caveat is that that will be after the desal plant is expanded to 5,000 acre feet or more in capacity. And no additional rate revenue needed to be generated in order to fund the project. Next slide. And again, I wanted to highlight our project website. It will be really our centralized hub of communication, both before and during construction. And anyone who's interested can visit that site for more information and also to subscribe for updates. We will be providing regular updates throughout construction on our progress. And by subscribing, you can receive an automatic email notification when the city makes updates. And I've also provided contact information for Carson Woolert, our city project manager, including his phone number and our project email address that we've created. That mailbox will be monitored by several staff in order to ensure prompt responses. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from the commissioners right now? Commissioner Keller.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you. I mean, I think this is, you guys are on top of it. And it seems like you've got things, everything's been very well thought out. And with communication to the public, I think that's going to be really important. But thank you very much for the presentation.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? I actually have just a comment. I sit on the MTD board, Metropolitan Transit District Board, and I know that on Salsa Puente, it's right there above Ailing. We dispatch all our buses all day long, and it's going to be a major coordination effort to do that. So just a little special note, and I'll pass it on to Jerry Estrada, the general manager, to get in contact, because we're going to have to reroute all the bus routes in the city to deal with that. So thanks for the heads up. Anybody else? Pretty exciting project, gotta say. It's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing it proceed. And it was nice today also to hear about it's a 4-part project to get this whole thing done. And thank you very much, Ms. Shu, for the presentation. This is just a presentation, and I'm sure we'll be hearing back from you as the project goes forward with some updates. Good, thank you very much. Okay, Takes us to our last major item, that is the Water Resources Manager Report. Mr. Hagmark, you're up,
Yes.
buddy.
Chair Davis, commissioners, just going to walk through this. I believe this information went out a couple days ago, but just wanted to walk through kind of a general status. I also have Ms. Corey, who's available if there's further questions. But one of the things I wanted to point out to you is we did come across an error in our spreadsheet, and we wanted to correct that. But let's go through quickly. We're tracking actually really closely. This takes us, we're tracking really closely with what we had predicted, but I want to dig into this a little bit. And the one I want to draw your attention to is in this next slide, the net overlap water. And in short story, there are elements along the edges of both sides of the city, Montecito and Goleta, in which we have an overlap agreement, in which we in various areas provide water to Goleta customers and they provide water to city customers. And the same thing happens on the other end. It's really just it happens in most agencies that affront others, and it really just comes down to who's in a better position to provide service. So this is something we've been doing for years, and we keep track of that water. So at the end of the year, we do what's called a true up with our neighbors, and typically our neighbors owe us water. And that's why you see that negative number. We had been tracking that, and what we discovered is that our link to the overlap water was not the final total. And so I believe a month or two back when we were reporting this, we had a negative 500 acre feet. And in actuality, once you included the water they served our customers, ultimately it brought that number down to a negative 134. And so we had 400 acre feet of water that was not included, that our customers used, that were not included in that calculation going back to, I believe, November. So we've made that correction. And what it's done is it's dropped our 12-month running average water conservation from 25%, which we're reporting, down to 21%, which obviously is disappointing, but still recognizing the 21% is in outstanding conservation over 2013, when many of our neighbors are still have saw their water usage return to their 2013 usage. So we're doing really good. And I wanted to point out, next slide, kind of just to put that, frame that, our potable system totals. So we had planned for 9,334 acre feet of water, and we're currently at 9,779, tracking about almost 5% over for the year, which is still really close given how dry this year is. Keep in mind, when we put together these estimates, this was probably this time last year. We certainly planned for drought, but when you certainly have as dry as it has been, your customer demands do go up. So I really still believe our customers are doing the right things. We're still seeing the behavior we're looking for, but just wanted to make sure that we got this data corrected and we're all working with the same numbers. I also wanted to point out too, just over to just below that, there's also the year-to-date for recycled water. And you can see that our recycled water customers have used about 16% more. Again, because of the drier conditions, our parks and golf courses are just using more water, which in that case is from a renewable source. Next slide. And with that, we're reporting on this. We're getting to the end of our water year. September is actually the last of that. So we have plans to come to you in November and do a comprehensive update on how did we end the year and how are we looking for the coming year and whether or not we need to make any changes in our drought stage. So with that, I'm just going to skip to the next slide. And we continue to monitor our plan. We now have our enhanced urban water management plan in here, and you can see that as it relates to our 12-month production. So this is just production. This isn't customer demands. This is a production number. There are some nuances to that. So next slide. And then here, I just wanted to comment on that. That correction did not impact our current residential GPCD, which still sits at 69. And wanted to note that our conservation, even after the correction, our conservation for August was 28% below 2013. So really still seeing really strong conservation numbers from the community. And then our 12-month running average at 21. And with that, let's see, I wanted to, I guess, open it up to the commission if there's any slides in particular you would like me to speak to.
Commission, speak up. Anybody have any question, comments on any of the other parts of the report? Commissioner Keller, Arturo.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Hagmark. I think one of the challenges that many of us are facing, and it's not part of the report, but it's part of the comments that we just heard, is keeping our trees alive. And that's the concern. It's like, we've conserved, and that's great for, we've removed our lawns and all that, but keeping the trees alive is a big challenge. And so in these times of, serious drought that we've been through, that's a challenge. I don't know what we can do, but just something to think about. What could be done in terms of particularly trees that are accessible through, by the street or something? Is there something we could do to use reclaimed water with a pipe, with a truck or something, for some properties, I think that's a big challenge.
Yeah, Commissioner Keller, that's a great one. And it came up a few years ago, and we actually put some time into coming up with some exhibits to help customers to know where to water and how to water trees. Because I think that a lot of people don't understand that actually the tree gets the majority of its water out by the drip line, which is the edges of the trees, not really next to the stump. So where to water, how to water, and I think that's a great suggestion, an opportunity to really get that message back out there again. We did look into recycled water, and honestly, when we looked into it, the cost of trucking that water just environmentally was kind of a disaster. So really encouraging people to continue to use their potable water to keep their trees alive, but I think we can be really surgical about when to put it on and how to apply it such that you get the maximum benefit for your trees. But that's a great point. We certainly have an investment in tree infrastructure. We are not interested in, letting go and don't think we need to sacrifice that at this point. I think there's a lot of other things like grass that we could look at letting go and holding on to those trees. So I'll speak with our outreach folks and see what we can do to get that in some of our next outreach efforts concerning tree watering.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Other commissioners?
I do want to say we will continue to put information here on the status of the SLIP program. They've been really busy. We are planning to come back to the commission to talk some more about SLIP. And what I'll give you a kind of a teaser is that we're finding a lot of issues out there. And we've got a lot of customers who, for various reasons, aren't necessarily interested in doing much about their laterals. And I think the question that we want to come back to the commission and talk about is we've continued to make this program a carrot program. We're here to help. It's modeled after water conservation. We're here to help. If you want our help, we're going to throw our resources at it. If you don't want our help, we have the ability to find, but that's not something that I believe we are ready to do, nor do I believe the data supports going down that path. But we will be queuing up a discussion on that, probably I'm thinking right now in the November timeframe to come back and talk to the commission and just check in with where we are and lay out kind of a path going forward, because we've got a long list now of laterals that have been identified as being a potential problem. And we've contacted the customers, our residents, and like I said, for various reasons, they're either unable to or uninterested in taking the steps to evaluate or make repairs. So.
Councilmember Snedden, go ahead, Kristen.
Thank you. Well, since you mention it, and I know it's not agendized for that, but it does tie into the water link system with the desal up to Cater, and just how that will all be coordinated with. I know it's going to be, but it will be good to be hearing details about how it's coordinated with water main replacement and sewer laterals and then repaving, so that it's all coordinated. And I know we've talked a lot about this with the SLIP program, a street's freshly paved and then going in and doing slip work, and then a whole block at a time doing slip work all at once. So I'm glad you're mentioning it. I realize this isn't the place for that discussion, but I think those are really important points that I'm hearing a lot about.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, because part of the growth of the SLIP program, maybe was that we've been trying to get out ahead of the paving program. So anywhere we know they're going to pave, we've been going in, TVing our sewer line and identifying these and sending property owners. So because they're paving so much more these days, which is great, thank you, Measure C, we're getting a lot more paving done. We're also TVing a lot of these lines and finding all these problems. And so now we're just having so many more customers in the SLIP program that it's kind of overwhelming. Let's just say that it is overwhelming for the staff. And so trying to figure out and really come back and check in, do we continue to want to be carrot program, which is, hey, we've identified a problem, we think you need to take a look at this, versus, because the step is, if you let it go too far, in those cases, roots and or damaged laterals lead to blockages of the city's public sewer system. And that's obviously the area where we're interested in making sure that never happens. So anyway, lots of good stuff to unpack here. And when we do come back, we'll talk more also about the desal link project, because we did spend a lot of time trying to create a model in which, if we're going to touch someone's private lateral and there's a problem, we're just going to go ahead and take care of the issue while we're there. So, but we'll be happy to get into that more detail. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other comments, questions at this point? Josh, I want to thank you for continuing to give us the COVID measurement in our wastewater effluent. Again, it's very interesting data. And, again, we're in the middle of this Delta surge, and it's very, very interesting just to see at least the superficial correlation, which is there, not cause and effect, but at least the correlation in that regard. So thank you for that.
You bet.
Okay, anybody else? Any other comments? Okay, I think that basically concludes our agenda for today. Our next regular meeting will be Thursday, October 21st, 2021, again at 9 a.m. And as I said, we'll still be GoToWebinar. We're not back public in person for a while. So we will be, again, electronically broadcasting our meeting. Thank you, everybody, for the presentations today. Everybody stay safe, and we will see you in a month. Thank you very much.